Good evening and welcome to the May 22nd meeting of the Civil Service Commission. May we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Manukian?
Yes, here.
Commissioner Gazarian?
Here.
Commissioner Gantis?
Here.
Chair Devine?
Here.
For the record, Commissioner Hatamian is absent tonight.
Fine, thank you. What is next, please?
Minutes?
Move to approve, dispense from reading. Second.
We have unanimous consent on that. Next item, please.
Oral communications?
I have no cards. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address the commission on items not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item.
Recruitment and examination report.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is your recruitment and examination status report. This is the report which indicates the recruitment activity amongst the staff currently. It has the list of various departments, the positions, the dates that these jobs have opened, test dates, and so forth. This is a note and file that does show a lot of information. A little bit of a pickup in activity, particularly in our community services and parks department, our public works department, and certainly in our police department where we've got some recruitments going. So Mr. Sessian and Mr. Kwan are both very busy these days. Other than that, if you have questions on this report, I'd be happy to try and answer them. Otherwise, as I said earlier, this is a note and file.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, we'll note and file it and move on.
Eligible lists established.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this report addresses the eligible lists that have been established since our last meeting. As you can see from the report, we have 9 lists that have been established, which is a good amount of recruitment activity. Most of these are promotional, meaning they were restricted to our in-house staff, but as you can see, even with some of our promotional recruitments, we do end up with a lot of interest, a lot of applications. A good example would be the gardener position at the bottom, where we had 29 applicants. 10 individuals made the list, but anyhow, what you see mainly are open recruitment processes. We have larger numbers of candidates, and the far right column addresses those who ultimately made it through the various selection processes to the eligibility list, and it's typically what you see, a reflection of our very, very competitive process. Again, if you have questions about any of these exams or lists that have been established, I'd be happy to try and answer them. This, too, is a note and file item.
I have a quick question. I don't know if it applies necessarily to this, but last several years we've had so much cuts in different departments that the impact obviously was felt all around. Now, what happens to departments as this economy is picking up and the load factor to these? For example, the planning and permits, all these, the load factor will obviously start, it already has in my opinion. Do we start getting prepared for that and giving the department the resources needed to get ready for that, or they just don't get it because budget cuts are still in effect?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Manukian, it's a good question. I mean, this organization underwent a huge transition over this past fiscal year, and it all sort of began with the collapse of redevelopment and the need to eliminate upwards of 50 positions in that area. And we had just some collateral problems with our budget, both with the general fund and some of our enterprise funds, GWP. We lost a good number of employees last year due to a retirement special retirement plan that was offered, as well as, fortunately, some layoffs. The department, I think the organization over the past, I would say, 6 months is trying to find its bearings and see what's necessary to have and what is not in order to run these departments. But I will tell you, most departments are running very, very tight. Staffing levels are very low. And it's good to see that at least some of these positions are being filled, but as you see, a lot of them are just being handled promotionally. And in a lot of cases, it's simply reallocating one existing position for another and not necessarily bringing in more new people.
That's the thing. This is not necessarily solving my problem. I mean,
That's correct. So it's going to be challenging, but you know, the budget realities are such that this is what we were dealt with. So we're doing our best, but you can rest assured this organization is running well, and the people who are still here are working their tails off.
and that's the part that I think it's, you know, they're doing a great job, but the load factor is going to come to a point that we're going to start losing good employees because it's not fair for the amount of load. But it is what it is. We can only work with, I guess, we just need more money.
Any other
That's it.
questions? Seeing none, we'll note and file that one and move on, please.
Advertising budget expenditures report, January 2013 through March 2013.
Okay, Mr. Doyle?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is your quarterly report on advertising expenditures. This addresses the period of time from January of this year through March, and the report indicates the amount of spending that was done primarily on recruitment advertising, and you see the various publications that are addressed in this. This report traditionally is broken down into three areas. The first having to do with those publications and websites that deal with targeting of our various ethnic communities. The second part deals with publications and websites targeting technical and specialized classification type recruitments. And then the third category is just the general publications, like our newspapers and things like that. Again, we have spent approximately $3,400 in this particular quarter, and this is somewhat unusual. This report that we were allotted $13,900 in our budget at the start of this fiscal year, and we've almost spent that entire amount, and that's unusual. Usually we do allow some little leeway. But this particular budget has been cut significantly in the past few years. I personally can remember the days where this budget was about $150,000 a year when we were running ads in the Los Angeles Times Sunday. That's not an effective way of advertising any longer with everything web-based. But still, our budget has gone down from $50,000 to $40,000 to $30,000 to $20,000, I believe it was last year, and again, it's now at just about $14,000, and we're at a point where we've almost spent all of it. And we had some recruitment activity this year that would justify that kind of spending. A lot of it in the public safety area, police. It's good to see we're recruiting for police officers, but. Anyhow, this is your report, and if you have questions on this, I'd be happy to try and answer them. Said we have one quarter remaining, and we'll do our best to stay within our budget this process.
This is the first time I actually, in all fairness, in the past, you've always been the spending has been so low in comparison to the actual budget. So you're absolutely right. When I originally got on the board, your budget was much higher. I told you to spend it, and they're going to take it away. You didn't listen; they took it away.
Well,
but you've been doing great. I mean, in comparison for the amount, this is fantastic.
we get a lot out of our advertising dollar, certainly. And again, the fact that so many of these organizations have websites, it's much cheaper to run than the old days when you would have to buy an ad in the newspaper. And you'll even see the Glendale News Press, one of our ads that we ran for the police recruit, $391 for one weekend, which is a lot of money for a local paper. But our objective, particularly in recruiting for police officers, is to try to recruit in the area, the Glendale, Burbank, La Crescenta area. So that's why we would select the local paper.
Any other questions?
I have a comment, Mr. I'm sorry.
Mr. Kazarian?
Okay, very briefly, thank you. On page 2, several of the items have no amounts. I assume those are at no cost, such as the City of Glendale website and GTV Channel 6. And that's something that I would like you to say.
Certainly.
It is with no cost, right?
Absolutely.
And then with that in mind, my question is, what happens if we are looking at an expense in excess of $528? Where does the money come from?
It would be part of, it would be covered in
General-
another part of our budget.
I see. Okay.
Our human resources budget is divided primarily into two areas. One is for personnel-related costs, salaries, benefits, and the other is maintenance and operations, M&O. And this advertising falls under M&O. And I think there's a little bit of leeway in some of the other specific sub-accounts within our M&O to cover if we should happen to exceed the $13,900.
It's not a special tax that gets assessed to the citizens and residents of Glendale, is it?
No, not.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, John?
Mr. Chairman, what I think Mr. Doyle failed to mention is, in addition to what we advertise and the free websites that Mr. Commissioner Kazarian was talking about, our people who are out at job fairs, they go to the cruise night, they'll have a table there with bulletins, and they interact with the people just for these specific, for police recruit and fire and all of the jobs, and I think they also have gone to the college and certainly something up at the Civic. So in addition to the advertising that we spend, we have a lot of manpower that's not included in this that is on one-on-one, which I think is really critical as well.
Thank you. Any other questions? Next item.
Class specification for approval, Human Resources Certification Specialist.
Mr. Doyle?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this position is a class specification for a newly established job title. And this is one within my shop, Human Resources Certification Specialist. This position is kind of the heartbeat of the Human Resources Department, in that pretty much all personnel transactions that occur within Human Resources go through this particular position, this particular desk. While the biggest single responsibility of this classification would be to more or less manage the coordination of our eligibility lists that get established at the end of our examination processes. The individual in this position would also process many other personnel transactions, including the hirings of new people, promotions, separations from employment, step increases, and two very important other areas, the personnel file management, and that's very important because there are a lot of rules that govern access to personnel files, employees' access to other people being able to access them, and most importantly, this desk oversees the performance evaluation process. And I think the Commission is well aware of how seriously we take our performance evaluations, and you see it every month with our late notices and such. So this is an important position, and this desk was formerly managed by an employee, many of you recall, Debbie Mallon, along with Salpi Jagaspanian, and Debbie has since retired, and now it's pretty much all on Jagaspanian's shoulders right now. But what the function is being handled by a fairly generic classification of administrative assistant, and we feel that these duties are so specialized, particularly the confidentiality of it, that it is deserving of its own specialized classification title. Therefore, we're putting forth this position. A few months ago, the City Council did approve the establishment of this title, and we therefore are bringing forth the specification for Commission's approval. If you have questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them. Miss Amy Martin from my staff worked on the details of this. She's here tonight.
Mr. Doyle, do we have any particular criteria or checks or something to ensure that the candidate is able to handle the confidentiality of the material? Because the personnel records are indeed very, very confidential. Do we have a background check or anything like that that goes with this?
Yeah, that's a good question, Commissioner Gantis. There is no background check for individuals in my department. We certainly, before hiring somebody new, we would do reference checks and find out as much as we can. But one thing we do from day one when somebody is brought into my department is we have them sign a confidentiality agreement and sit down with them and make them aware that pretty much everything that they handle is going to be of a confidential nature, and it's vitally important that they not engage in any type of discussion about the things that they see, the things that come across the desk, and engage in any kind of gossip or anything like that. So that's pretty much what we do, and we do have all the individuals who would have access to these types of records are evaluated each year and held accountable for their actions. And if there's ever been a breach of confidentiality, that's typically dealt with very, very seriously. In fact, probably 11 years ago, I had to fire someone for breaching some confidentiality on an examination process. So very serious stuff.
Any other questions?
I have a couple of questions. One, many of the functions of this new classification appear to be high-value functions. A few of them come to mind here: monthly reporting to the city manager, serving as custodian of records for personnel files, which Commissioner Gantis touched upon, handling confidential information with discretion. It is a non-exempt position, and in light of the essential functions of this position, I'm curious as to why, in addition to 4 years of experience performing civil service certifications or other related human resource transactions, that there isn't a requirement of a college degree or even something higher than that. If you can elaborate.
Commissioner Gazarian, good question. As important as this position is at its core, we believe this is a clerical administrative position. There's all kinds of rules and policies that this person must abide by, but the individual is not engaged in any type of high-level decision-making that would warrant another managerial or even a mid-managerial type of title. So while there are a variety of attributes that we feel are very important for this position, the number one being trust, confidentiality, competence, of course, we don't feel a college degree would necessarily be a requirement here, nor an exempt, FLSA exempt status. We're comfortable with the level this would be.
So it would be fair to say that though it is referenced as a subject of a promotional recruitment in the near future to fill this key position, as the first page indicates, it's really a key position only to the extent that it is key to the internal workings of the department, not in the decision-making or any affect, if you will, to the human resources personnel and the wider civil service employees of the city, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
And when there are questions of policy or interpretation, the individual in this position would run that by myself or Ms. Martin or one of the other analysts. But it's a very high-level job involving processing lots of important, very key information for the department.
And this recruitment, would it be from within?
Yes.
Would it be open? Okay.
It'd certainly be within. And
Right.
the individuals who would be eligible for this would be individuals with many years of experience working in such an environment.
Very well, thank you.
You just asked my question, so if that's all we have, did you have
Move
anything?
to approve?
Second.
Unanimous consent. And we'll go to the next item, please.
Class specification for approval, Network Specialist Series.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is really a long-awaited and much-needed establishment of a job series. This is called the Network Services Series. And this series relates to, it's within our Information Services Department. Focuses on maintaining the city's network. We've done many studies over the years looking at the various IT functions, including a very recent analysis of our PC staff, our personal computer operator staff, and we found that we do have employees within our department currently who are working exclusively on network-related functions. With that, their experience is all network-related, the work is network-related, their certifications are network-related, and we feel that at this point it's important to establish this as its own standalone series. Many other agencies, private sector, public sector, similarly have network-related classifications. And what we put here is a series that has more or less, it's 4 job titles. We're not going to use all of them, but we like to have a series that addresses an entry level, a more journey level, a senior level, and ultimately, if we ever do need a specialized supervisory level, we want to have that in place. Right now, we're probably looking at transferring 1 or 2, perhaps 2 positions to this level at this point. Therefore, we're asking your approval now to establish this series. Today, we have lots of people here who could possibly answer any questions you may have, including our new Chief Information Officer, Brian Ganley. We have the interim Chief Information Officer, John McTallion, and let's not forget Russ Kwan from my staff, who is the HR analyst who works with our IS department. So with that, Commissioner, if you have questions, concerns, we would be happy to try and answer those for you.
I just want to know who does these things now.
It's typically, well, why don't I have someone from the department speak? It's typically other employees in a more generic job
Okay.
titles.
Chair, Devine, members of the Commission, I can try to answer most of your questions. I do have Eric Brum, our Infrastructure Administrator, who can answer the more detailed ones. Currently, we have 2 individuals in the network section. The first is an individual named Razmik Ohanian, who's sitting here in the audience. He's a full-time employee, PC specialist. He's been in that capacity for, I forget how many years, but he's been doing this for at least 5 or 6 years specifically with networks under the title of a PC specialist. The second individual is an hourly employee who works nearly in a full-time capacity on a fairly regular schedule.
Okay. And when we create these classifications, is Mr. Ohanian going to fit into one of those and continue with his duties with an appropriate title, one of the 4 that I'm looking at? Or?
Yes, sir. Commissioner Gazarian, yes. And in fact, later on in our agenda, we'll be addressing
Okay.
Mr. Ohanian.
Okay. All right. That's all I have. Thank you.
I just, clearly doing network work is important and somewhat specialized. Are we comfortable that, and I just don't know where the level is, that the network specialist supervisor does not have a computer science, BA, rather than an AA? I just don't know. I'm not seeing on here where that person is going to be, who they're going to be reporting to. I take it they're going to be under the ISD administrator. Is that correct?
That's correct. Commissioner Ganesh, we have no plans at this time to fill the network services supervisor at this point. The level we're interested in at this time would be the network specialist.
Do we have anybody that would be having that kind of a degree in the computer science, computer engineering, or a related field that would be in this field? I assume that's our chief information officer, I would imagine.
Maybe I could have Mr. Ganley or Mr. Tektalian address that, the level of education required in positions of this nature.
I got about 10 questions for you too, Mr. Ganley, who just started on Monday, just to make you feel at home.
Don't hold it against him. He's day 3.
He's trying to extend his his tenure with us, which is music to my ears. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. So I'd like to talk about my personal background. I do not have a degree in computer science or engineering. Came up through the field, entering in at an entry-level position with a degree in business administration, followed up with a degree in public administration. I think that's very common in the technology field, especially for people that have been in the field for quite some time. There weren't the same array of degrees even 10 years ago that there are today to address the needs of modern technology. So I'm very comfortable not requiring specific degrees related to that field.
Well, and I understand what you're saying completely. My daughter actually has a BA in computer science, so, and you're correct. But today, that is really very much in vogue to have that kind of a degree, and we're moving this forward. But you're comfortable. I see we're doing the AA in those particular fields. So if you're comfortable at the AA level at that, I'm comfortable with that. I'm not sure we shouldn't, though, revisit do we have an ISD administrator now?
Yes.
We
yes,
do.
Those positions.
We do. We have
Okay,
3.
and that might be something to revisit in terms of that position, and I'm not saying not for Mr. Ganley, because I understand he's correct, but that we might want to relook at. We're talking the future now, and that maybe we want to revisit some of that.
I'm about 99% certain that the administrator levels do require college degrees.
Perfect.
As does certainly
Yes.
Mr. Ganley's position.
I agree, and we have one of our ISD administrators with us this evening, Eric Brum, who does have that type of degree.
Perfect.
Those are the 10 questions?
That's it.
John, there's these things
Can I follow up?
square that are called computers.
I know what
And they-
computers
I'll
are.
tell you, they're
Thank you.
I'm sorry, what was your name, sir?
I'm Brian Ganley.
And you did say you have did you not say you have a master's in public administration?
That's correct.
Okay. And in the course and scope of your years employed in the working field, if you will, all of these tasks that you alluded to, the fact that there weren't many of those degrees back in the day, that today they exist, and in fact Commissioner Gantus's daughter has one of those degrees. Nevertheless, the information that is fed into those individuals who then are provided or obtain those degrees, would you say that someone such as yourself, or in this case yourself, have acquired the information irrespective of the piece of paper that you can put on the wall that gives it the title that it does, computer science, if you will, or whatnot?
Absolutely, yes, I agree with that. On-the-job training.
Right.
I'm sure if I were entering college today, I would probably be pursuing one of those degrees.
Okay. And have you attended continuing education seminars to see to it that you are up to date with those areas that you come into contact with currently, if you do, in your line of work?
I have several things to keep current with technology for everyone in the field is an ongoing process.
Right.
Part of the attraction to the field for someone like me, that it is constantly updating and changing. I enjoy that fast-moving pace and that constantly having to learn new things.
Very well. Thank you very much. Thank you. Nothing further.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, what I was going to say is, just as a clarification, some of these, having the degree in the computer programming, some of these fields that they're referencing are actually much more advanced, and you're not going to have the technical, being a NT specialist myself in the background, you're not going to have some of these points by getting that degree.
No, that's true.
You need the practical experience, is what you're saying.
I'd take the
Right.
practical anytime
I agree.
Right.
over the
Okay.
diploma.
much like it might be compared to human resources with several different areas of expertise.
Okay, I do have one question. I believe you said Monday was your first day here.
That's
and
correct.
Knowing that, I'm assuming the spec was put together before you were here and you did not have any input into that. Is that correct?
I was aware of it, but at the tail end, yes.
Okay. And with that being said, is this something that you can work around or live with, or you would have endorsed yourself if you had been here to put it together? Or would you be tweaking this to meet your ideas and thoughts on furthering the department?
I do agree with this change, and I've spent quite a bit of time over the past 3 days looking at these issues, these and other related issues in the department. I very much agree with this move.
Great. Okay, if there's no other question,
To approve?
Second.
we approve it unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next item, public hearing, adoption of resolution, report on unclassified status proposal for administrative officer.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is a request to declare a position to be filled as unclassified. Unclassified status means that this position would fall outside of the civil service system and not have the normal protections that one would accrue with civil service protections. This is a request that we rarely make. We do in some cases when we have concerns whether or not the funding for a particular position may not be as reliable or stable as we would like. Typically, you'll see positions declared unclassified for those that are either federally funded or state funded, and there might be some limitation on the duration of a particular source of funding. Might be a grant or something that might run out. In these cases, we do not want to afford the full civil service privileges. Therefore, in the circumstance, if that money does run out, then we would want the ability to simply defund the position and, fortunately, lay the individual off. We have a circumstance here, as the report describes. This is a position that previously would have been funded through redevelopment. As you know, the redevelopment agencies were collapsed via legislation last year, and therefore we're having to deal with the successor agencies that have essentially been what formerly our redevelopment entity attached to. The successor agency is subject to it's called Recognized Obligation Payment Schedule, which is known as ROPS, which essentially provides funding in 6-month blocks of time. And this funding has to be approved by the State of California Department of Finance. So the issue we have with this job is we have a need for these positions and for this position, and there are projects, but the funding for those positions is not certain, and we have to continually go back to the state every 6 months and request funding to keep this program going. Therefore, again, we have the need to fill a position in this classification of administrative officer, but because of the uncertainty of the funding, we're therefore asking to be able to fill the position, but to be able to fill it as an unclassified position. And the specific request is to have it filled as an unclassified or declared unclassified through July 1st of 2016. We're fairly comfortable that that would be an appropriate duration for this particular request. I would love to speak to you more thoroughly about the whole redevelopment process, the oversight boards, the successor agencies in the state, but there are people here who are much more qualified to do so. Mr. Hagani is here, and again, Ms. Martin from my staff who put this item together. So if you have questions, again, I'd be happy to try and answer them for you.
Any questions?
I have one question. Is this position something that doesn't exist now, or we're going to fill it?
Commissioner Gazarian, we're planning to fill this position because there is work. Again, some of these projects that were formerly would have fallen under redevelopment are still in the running. We've still been given approval to continue them.
Right.
At the, by
But there
the
is current-
dictate of the state. And so
I guess what I'm saying is there a current employee right now who is an administrative officer who was doing some of these things? Or is it something that we're going to fill this position, and you're requesting, the appointing authority is requesting to fill the position, so that would lead me to think there is no one in that position currently?
my understanding is there is no one in this position currently.
So if there is no one in this position currently, then my question is, why would we be looking at a resolution to declare this position of an administrative officer as an unclassified position rather than creating this position at the outset as an unclassified position? Because it sounds like it is a classified position, but we're now resolving to make it unclassified, but it's, so I'm confused.
It is a classification. It's an existing classification.
Oh, it's an existing classification.
It is.
I
Yes.
see. I see.
It's an existing, and we may have multiples of these, but what we're asking for is the declaration of a position to be filled.
I see.
On an unclassified basis. Doesn't mean all of them will be, and again, I don't know if we have others or we plan to fill others, but it would be, this particular one in this area would be an unclassified position.
Okay, and it would be specific to Administrative Officer - Community Development Department.
That's correct.
The uneasiness that I have is if something is classified and there's somebody in that classified position, I'm uneasy about taking what I perceive that to be a vested right and taking it away from them and calling what we're doing here as due process of law. But it sounds like that's not the case,
That is not the case.
right?
Not the case.
What he
Okay.
said is there's an existing position that currently is unfilled, and
Right.
we're in the list of
Okay.
classified,
Right.
and we're asking it to be.
I think Mr. Hagani has some information for us.
It's the answer, I think, has been implied in the discussion. There is no position that will be eliminated to fulfill in this position at this moment. This is a position that for which there is funding and for which there is work. However, such a position at this moment doesn't exist.
Okay. And it's a limited period that we're dealing with, and we don't know if it's going to be available post that date.
I mean, literally, every 6 months, we have to go begging to the state
Yeah.
to
No, I'm
continue to receive this
comfortable.
money
Okay.
to continue this program on,
The
and we
part-
just don't know, we're subject to their whim, more or less.
The part that I have a quick question on, then, knowing the fact that we have to go back every 6 months, and by the way, this whole thing with the redevelopment, in my opinion, was a big scam. You guys all got scammed, because what they sold us on, that the funding were going to be relocated to the schools, they're not going to see a dime of that. Anyway, that's a different story. You're asking for, you have the funding until 2016, for sure? Or is this something that you're certain we do?
It would be the other way around. We're requesting that this be allowed to be an unclassified position through
Until.
2016.
Okay, I'm sorry.
But we may not
Right,
even have the
that's fine.
funding.
You still have to go back and get every 6 months get the funding.
Maybe I could, I've been here for you. What this does is, the position, as long as it's an unclassified position, if there is no funding, we then can terminate the position without having the usual civil service, layoff, bumping, and Matt's absolutely correct. We went through the flip of this 7 years ago, 8 years ago, when we classified unclassified positions, because we went through each one of them, but those that weren't in this position. This position is one that if it's volatile funding, you don't want to keep somebody and then put them on the layoff list, and and then there's bumping. You just becomes a real
I remember
problem.
we did this, I think, for another, that was on grants.
Yeah, the ARRA grants, the stimulus funding grants.
That's exactly right. We had like 12
Still have
positions.
some of those positions.
12 positions, I think we did.
Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
This is the one that's the public hearing?
Open hearing,
Next one.
public hearing.
Unanimous consent? Mr.
No, no,
Oh, hold on. You're right. Even after being told, I blew it. This is supposedly a public hearing, so is there anybody in the audience, I'm going to open the public hearing, is there anybody in the audience that wishes to speak on this item? Seeing none, we close the public hearing. Thank you, Ms. Arpetian. We have a motion and second.
I already voted on it. What are you guys?
Well, we didn't vote because we didn't have the
Oh, you
public
didn't
hearing.
vote?
No.
Okay.
So now we have unanimous consent, and
Yes.
we move on to the next item.
Agenda forecast.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this is the agenda forecast. We really, there's not a lot on the radar for the next few months. We do have one hearing that is just about wrapped up. There may be another one upcoming shortly. But outside of that, our upcoming meetings are more or less open at this point. Sometime in we're probably looking at the first meeting in June as the reorganization of the commission, appointment of the chair and vice chair. But aside from that, that's a note and file report. If you have anything you want to add, let us know.
I only want to bring up that I will not be here on July 10.
I won't be here on the July 24th date.
Anything else?
No.
Okay. Next item.
Reports, past due employee performance evaluation.
And I'm going to ask Mr. Gaddis for the final time to give us the report on this.
And this is actually a very good one. City Attorney's Office, these are the departments that have no past dues. City Attorney's Office, City's Manager's Office, City Treasurer's Office, Community Development Department, Fire Department, Glendale Water and Power, Police Department, Public Works Department, all have no past dues. And out of a salary count of 1,490 employees, we have a total of 17 that are either first or second notices, which is very, very good.
Thank you very much. Next item.
Civil Service Commission, staff comments.
Do we have any comments from the commissioners?
Well, I mean, if this is really the last time we're going to have Commissioner Gantis here, I just got to say that, you know, there are people with principles and people with personalities, and Commissioner Gantis has endeared himself to me as a person with principles and a personality. And I, for one, will deeply regret not having you on this commission. And I have a feeling that I will see you again on this commission, or some body, some official body, that you will be continuing to be the man of principle as well as the man with the personality. And I thank you for the opportunity to be serving with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
My two attorney friends talking about principle. I love it.
And the real estate person talking. What happened to our economy, by the way? Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Sam. I love you anyway.
No, and
You don't want to be taking me on. Really, I love you. Come on. Go ahead.
Tom, you want to handle this? No, but in all fairness, I think I probably are the one that's going to miss you the most. I've got nobody to pick on.
I'm right here.
And yeah, your turn is coming, bro. But in reality, I mean, your guidance and your leadership throughout the years has been, all joking aside, has been true. I don't know, first of all, how you've done it this long, but that's a different. But your leadership, your help, your guidance has been tremendous to this commission and to this city. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and as I feel a lot can be said about John and his 13 years, and I could spend probably 3 days here talking about it, so I've condensed it down to a few little short things.
There's our engineer.
Yeah, well, I want to make sure I covered all the important things. That, first of all, during the past 6 years, I've really enjoyed working with you as a colleague. Also, you've been a friend and a mentor, and I really appreciate that. Really, 4 areas come to mind that stick in my mind about John. First of all, it's called dedication. He's been 100% dedicated to this job. Most people just see him every other week on this dais, but in addition to that, we have hundreds, if not thousands, of hours for John in his 13 years that we spent on disciplinary hearings and other types of issues. So if anybody has given us the time, it's been John over the past 13 years. And I know the city really appreciates that, and it's been a great job. Second thing that comes to mind is his knowledge. John's an attorney, and he'll let you know about that. And
No, really?
yeah, right. And although his field of expertise is not in personnel, he knows a great deal about the law in terms of personnel and government law, and that's really been a great asset in dealing with many of the issues that we've had on this commission. The next thing, and I think most important to me, is John has always been fair. We've sat on many cases together, many panels together, and John always listened to both sides and made decisions based on facts and not based on any pressure from the outside that may come in. And I really admired him for that he kept an open mind and, again, dealt with just only the facts. And finally, this kind of irks me, one item irks me, that he's a record holder. He holds the record for the longest sitting civil service commissioner in the city of Glendale's history, 13 years. And second, he chaired the shortest meeting as chair. I think it was 12 minutes, and I've been trying to break that record, but that hasn't happened, so I have to hold that against him. Unfortunately, in spite of the many positive things, there is one other additional negative thing I have to bring up about John. It's really disappointed me, quite frankly. In the 6 years I've been here, John has never admitted that engineers are as smart as attorneys. And in fairness,
The reason for that.
in fairness, I have to say that on occasion, John has said, "Art, for an engineer, you made a good decision." However, that's not the same as stating that we are equal. So I'm hoping that over the years, you'll come to a new resolution and say that perhaps we're close to brain power of attorneys.
So stubborn, he's never going to do that.
And notwithstanding that item, John, I want to echo what my colleagues have said about you. You'll be sorely missed, and I truly appreciate being able to have served with you for all these years. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, may I say a few words
Absolutely.
before John begins his speech? And I just want to get into some of the factual areas here. John, Commissioner Gantish was appointed July of 1999, if you can believe that. And so this
I
is
gotta write this down.
almost made 14 years, and I believe Chair Devine is correct. It's the longest-serving commissioner we have record on. And undoubtedly, I would say one of the most influential commissioners we've ever had. From the standpoint of staff, John, really did hold us accountable. You asked very difficult questions, and it was never easy answering those questions, but it really kept us on our toes. And I think, as challenging as some of these issues have been, you've been abundantly fair, and I wanted to make sure our staff is here to bid you farewell tonight. They all came. They were all doing various things. Many of them were at the fire station working on an oral board, but they all rushed back here in order to be here to honor you tonight. But we really do have loved working with you, and I think there's a great amount of affection between our staff and yourself, and the amount of dedication and loyalty that you've given to this city and this commission in particular, I mean, it has to be thousands of hours if you count all of the disciplinary appeal hearings that you participated in, and that's just an incredible amount of dedication for essentially no pay other than an occasional
They don't get paid?
dinner or.
I got paid, you don't.
So
Then give them a raise.
we'll double your salary. Okay?
That's good.
But anyway, it's been wonderful working for you, and there's been so many things, so many key accomplishments that you have been the driving force behind. I can't even begin to talk, but many of the things that we've changed, the disciplinary appeal processes, the civil service rules, you've probably been part of at least 3 or 4 amendments of our rules. The whole issue of the evaluations and holding our departments accountable for late evaluations, that was one of Mr. Gantis's big areas. But there have been many great accomplishments over the course of nearly 14 years. And again, as a staff member, and the other important thing is you were part of appointing me to this job.
It's true.
Many people don't know that my job, I not only serve as director of HR, but I also must be appointed chief examiner by this commission. So
Close vote, too.
But anyway, I want to thank you very much on behalf of the staff, and I know city manager feels the same way, and certainly your colleagues, past and present. We really do appreciate all your dedication and hard work to this commission. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, I have spent some time remembering some of the past things, and it has been close to 14 years. I was initially appointed by Councilwoman Ginger Bremberg, who we all have fond memories of, and now Judge, then Councilman Gus Gomez, back in 1999, July of 1999. And at the time, of course, Jack Hoffman was the Director of Personnel and was approaching the end of his 25 years as the Personnel Director. And at the time, you were the Senior Human Resources Analyst, and Amy, who's now one of our 2 Human Services Administrators, was a Customer Service Representative. And Manya, I think you were just kind of like a dream in somebody's mind or something. And now Manya is one of the Human Resources Administrators. Matt, I indicated to you before, and certainly Manya and Amy stick out in my mind as the people that I've seen grown in their position, and it's amazing. Matt, you've certainly done a lot. I think we've done a lot together to change the atmosphere and the culture of the Civil Service Commission and how it deals with our constituents, which are everybody in the city. Every department is a constituent of HR in this commission. I want to thank Matt for his support. Thank my fellow commissioners. I've said this, and I truly mean this. This is probably overall, all 5 commissioners, one of the better ones that I've worked with. These are very, very intelligent people, including Art, and and very devoted and dedicated people. Sam, you and I go back a long way, but the number of years, 6 years that you've been on, you've always done your job, and I've appreciated. We kid each other, but I've respected everything you've done, and your opinions have always been, and your input in some of the very hard closed session items that we undertake has been very good. Garo, what can I say? We're fellow Lebanese. Garo is very, 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 very focused, very intelligent, and you've brought a new level to this commission. A lot of questions that need to be asked, and you do, and I have always appreciated that.
Don't let it get to your head.
Yeah. Last but not least is our chairman, Art. Art and I have really grown together. I've learned a lot from Art, and I know he doesn't think that, but he does. And what I've told you, Art, is not that that you are thinking more like an attorney, and that is the highest compliment you can have, is that you're thinking more like an attorney. Art has been Art you know, the mind of an architect, excuse me, a mind of an attorney and the mind of an engineer are not necessarily coinciding a lot. But art brings that kind of a flavor, that kind of a perspective that is important. We don't always agree. I don't always agree with Garo. I don't agree with Ara or a lot of people, but we're able to reach a conclusion that I think is a fair conclusion, which I think we all do, and we shake hands walking out, and that's really an important thing. I think most of all that I will miss, and I want to be also thankful to those city council people that have appointed me. Frank Quintero, I believe the first time I was reappointed, made my nomination, and then Ara Najarian has appointed me twice, 2004 and again in 2008. And I'm very thankful for the opportunity you've done that. I was able to tell Ara that personally, that I was appreciative of the opportunity to be able to serve that. I will say that the most thing I will miss, I will not necessarily miss the hearings. I think I pretty much ran that route. I definitely won't miss the dinners because we've started to economize with this budget, which we should, and not have expensive meals. But I will miss the staff. This is a fabulous staff you've put together, Matt. I know I've told you that before. I am so impressed with the diversity of the staff and the intelligence of the staff and their devotion to the work of taking care of this city, taking care of the people who work in this city, and making sure that everything works well for all of the departments. I know all the departments appreciate it, and I've appreciated it. And I've given Manya a very, very hard time for a lot of years, more so than any of the others. And that's because Manya, I usually pick on those that to me shine, and all of you shine. And Steve, who's picked on Steve more than I have, or Amy. In fact, Amy, I went back and looked at one of my old minutes, and there was Topanian. I had your old name on there, and I'd forgotten that. I'd forgotten who that was. I had to realize who that was. Rosie, how could I say anything about that? And Tom back there, I know he's just sitting here waiting for something, but Tom Lorenz has always been there as well. So thank all of you. Thanks for the opportunity to all of these city councilmen and city manager and the city attorneys that I've worked with, and assistant city attorneys. This has been a very big pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, what is next, please?
Closed session.
Okay, at this point, we'll go into a closed session. We will be reporting out, but not on camera. So at this point, I'm going to ask anybody that's not associated with the closed session item to please sequester yourselves, and we will then continue on with the closed session item.